Dram show with me, Chris Goodrum. Before we start, a big heartfelt thank you to everybody that wrote some lovely comments on last week's episode of the show. Yes, it was a great milestone, and it's yeah, the comments were lovely. It was really nice, and you know, obviously, I hope I entertain you guys, and obviously from the comments that does seem to be the way. So that's really cool. Didn't get any sort of feedback from Brackla, unfortunately, but you know, that's the way of these things. Certainly, when you know, your distillery is owned by a multinational company. You don't have the touchy-feely kind of relationship that one had in the past. But anyway, that's, don't like to say, don't do it for the sort of like the slaps on the back and the plaudits, it has to be said. But anyway, on to this week's episode of the show. Now, obviously, I have a little bit of a closer relationship with Brave New Spirits, although even though they're a large company, and certainly judging by the size of their inventory, they're certainly damn big. And as you can see from the title page, we're looking at the latest releases in the Whisky Heroes range, which I've been looking forward to. And I have to say they've done a great job again with the labels and the names, and yeah, I know exactly what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, that's all well and good, but the juice. Yeah, well, indeed. I mean, obviously, from a visual point of view, sitting on the shelves, I mean, they do look good, and they obviously appeal to a certain demographic, shall we say? But of course, you're dead right. It's the juice in the bottle that counts. Is no point in having the greatest label on the face of the planet if your whiskey is not up to scratch at the end of the day. So. We will be having a look at the range. So yes, big thank you to the guys at Brave New Spirits for the samples. You're probably sort of going, well, wondering why I'm doing so many episodes of the show on Brave New Spirits. Well, one, they kind of asked me to do so, or well, then yeah, so we hope they'll appear in an episode of the show, and they obviously enjoy watching these episodes of the show, and they love the feedback, and yeah, so I'm more than happy to sort of review what they're up to, and because a lot of the time what they're up to is pretty good, and it's really nice to see they've actually stuck a range. They've been sort of flip-flopping and chopping and changing ranges ever since I've known them, and finally they appear to have settled. Whoa, good. And like I said, they look really cool, so let's hope the whiskey is likewise. So not really a great deal to say, apart from let's look at those ones. Okay, so first bottle we're looking at is a 12-year-old Linkwood. They've called this Back to the Roots. Now, obviously, all of the names they use have a sort of a tie-in to either the distillery or something, and I must admit I haven't asked what all the tie-ins are, because some of them are quite sort of, what's the word, vague, I would guess. Anyway, so this is Back to the Roots. It's a 12-year-old Linkwood, Firstville Tennessee bourbon barrel finish. It was cask number 2537902. That tripped off the tongue quite nicely. Distilled in June of 2012. Bottled this year at 56.7%. Bottling number 2 is a 9-year-old Royal Brackla, which they have called Highland Huntress, a Silent Pursuit. Maybe Royal Brackla Distillery is a bit quiet, but who knows? Maybe it's a Highland Huntress in disguise, who knows? Anyway, so this is a Firstville Oloroso hogshead finish, cask number 304250, distilled September of 2015 and bottled this year at 53.5%. Number 3 is a 13-year-old Mannochmore, which they have called The Watch. Again, don't quite know what the significance of that is. Funnily enough, the next bottling is called The Might of the Moor, and I would have thought it was probably a more apt name for the Mannochmore, but guess not. I mean, I don't make these things up at the end of the day anyway. So 13-year-old Mannochmore, Firstville PX Barrique, finish, cask number 23132003, distilled in March of 2012, bottled this year at 55.3%. The next one, as I already mentioned, is called the Might of the Moor. This is a 12-year-old Auchroisk. It is a Firstville Oloroso Hoggy finish. Yeah, a lot of sherry. You may well have noticed that. Cask number 808700, distilled in April of 2013, bottled this year at 57.2%. Penultimate bottling is, would you believe it, another sherry finish. Yes, indeed. This time we have a 13-year-old Benrinnes, which they have called Silent Night. Maybe that's what happens after you drink it, I don't know, but we shall find out. So Firstville PX Barrique finish, cask number 22051001. Oh, long numbers. It was distilled in December of 2011, bottled this year at 59.1%. And the final bottling of the afternoon is a Undisclosed Peated Highland Whisky, which they have called the Mask of Alpeton. And that is because it has been finished in a Firstville 8-year-old, or a Firstville tequila barrel, which had held 8-year-old, or had been used for 8 years, I believe. I don't know, or maybe. Anyway, it's a tequila barrel finish. So, like I said, Undisclosed Peated Highland. It's cask number 231542, distilled in February of 2010, bottled this year at 50.4%. So 15 years old, nice bit of age, as they're all fairly young, as we said. So anyway, that's the lineup. They're all cask strength, so once a butt is full, let's kick off with a bit of Linkwood then. Okay, so Firstville Bourbon barrel finish. One imagines it was probably initially aged in a refill hoggy or something like that. And indeed, there's a lot of oak. There's a mountain of the stuff. A veritable forest, as they say. You can really smell that American oak and that fat corn, and yeah, it's big and oaky. There's a little bit of barley, I will give it that. There's a touch of barley, a little bit of green fruit, some citrus, green banana, apricot. But it really is big and heavy on the oak, it has to be said. I mean, it's I suppose it is quite an appealing nose because of all that creamy oak. And the quality of the spirit is good, but you don't really get Linkwood. I mean, you get, obviously, like I said, the barley and little bits of citrus, but it's certainly, I'm not really getting any kind of clues. If I didn't know what it was, I think I would be hard pushed. Anyway, let's see what parts like. Again, it's pretty much mirrors the nose. It's big, it's oaky, it's fat, it's toffee, it's banoffee, it's more toffee, cream, corn. Got quite a bitterness on the finish. That oak is bittering quite a bit in actual fact. Yeah, again, like the nose, there's an element of barley, there's a little bit of citrus, but we are really talking oak monster. Which to me, it's just a bit too unbalanced. And you know, you're probably sort of saying, well, you like American oak, and I'm like, well, yeah, I do, but in moderation. It's exactly the same as sherry. In moderation, great. Once it's when it's too full on and too much in your face, it's kind of like, well, you know, where's the complexity? Anyway, let's see if a little drop of water kind of readdresses the balance a little bit, shall we? Yeah, well, it's still quite oaky. I mean, there's a little better balance, there's a little bit more citrus, there's a little bit more barley, but again, you know, it's not saying Linkwood to me. I'm not getting that sort of lovely kind of rich, oily kind of spirit character. It's still too much oak. I don't know about going back to the roots. They should probably be saying can't see the wood for the trees bottling, maybe. I don't know. Let's see what the pass on. Okay, so I'm getting more barley, I'm getting summer fruits. The balance is definitely better. The oak is still quite bitter at the finish. Certainly the balance is readdressed a little bit once you add a little drop of water to it. It's okay, but again, it's not 100% appealing to me. I can see people that would enjoy this because, like I said, it's got a very kind of, crowd pleasing nose. It's very oaky, it's very soft, it's toffeed and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it just lacks a little bit of complexity. Okay, so let's move on to the 9-year-old Royal Brackla. So, Highland Huntress. Let's see what... well, quite sherried. Herbal dried fruit, sultana, dried orange, sour fruit. Got quite sourness in actual fact, yeah. A little bit of oxidised apple. It comes across more like a Palo Cortado finish rather than an Oloroso. It's not as herbal as some Olorosos can be, although there is a little bit of herbaceousness there. What is actually lacking is any spirit character whatsoever. This is just all about sherry. There's a little kind of burnt raisiny note coming out now, a little bit of wood smoke possibly, but yeah, I'm not getting any character of the Royal Brackla. Anyway, let's see what the pass on. Again, the palate seems to say more Palo Cortado to me than Oloroso. It's masked, it's drying, it's more lighter dried fruits, it's not so dark as some Olorosos, certainly nowhere near as herbal, knowing how fastidious Brave New Spirits are about their casks and what they know about their casks, I'm guessing they know that this was actually an Oloroso hoggy. I certainly remember having conversations with independent bottling companies that had bought casks in the past and were just told it's a sherry cask or an ex-sherry cask or whatever. But nowadays, I think there's a lot more sort of a desire from the consumer to know exactly what sort of sherry cask, what sort of cask per se that it's been aged in, so the question to probably ask. But anyway, let's put a little drop of water with it and let's see if that kind of brings out any Royal Brackla character. Not really. I mean, there's a slight spirit note coming out now. The sherry is dropped off a little bit, and there's a little bit of cereal, and there's some sort of pollen heavy floral notes, but again, it is primarily about the sherry, it has to be said. Let's see what pass on. Yeah, okay, so the sherry has dropped off a little bit. And it's not really saying Royal Brackla again to me. It's got a sort of classically kind of slightly astringent, Highlandy kind of green fruit, a little minerality possibly. But it's still very much about the sort of like the sultanas and the lighter sort of dried fruits as opposed to the sort of darker Oloroso-y kind of character that most of us are probably used to. So, well, I mean, it's very clean, very pristine. There's no sulphur, there's no off notes, but there's no distillery character, unfortunately. on to the 13-year-old Mannochmore. So Firstville PX Barrique finish. Let's see what the nose gives us on this anyway. Now this smells more like an Oloroso sherry than a PX. It's certainly not got the sort of soft treacle, slightly tarry maybe kind of PX-y style. It's quite acerbic, quite again sour and very herbal. Like I said, more Oloroso in style than I would have said PX. A little bit of green fruit, yeah, a little bit of sort of astringency, but again, no real distillery character at all, unfortunately. And it's a little bit ungainly, possibly. But then, yeah, Mannochmore can be a bit of a funny old one, it has to be said. But anyway, let's see what the power's like. Right, well that's more herbal, no, less herbal, more PX in character on the palate. More treacle, quite soft, still masked a little bit, and no spirit character at all. It is purely about the sherry, and it's okay. There's a little bit of a cereal note on the finish, but again, it's kind of rather one-dimensional. It is just pretty much sherry and, you know, nothing else, unfortunately. Yeah, the nose is fairly samey. There's a little bit more burnt oak possibly, or burnt wood coming out, but it's still pretty much as the nose was when it was neat. Let's see what that's like. A little longer, a little more herbal, still pretty straightforward, sherried, dried fruit, and no distillery character. So there you go. So let's move on to the Might of the Moor. This is a 12-year-old Auchroisk and finished in a Firstville Oloroso Hoggy. Let's see what the nose gives on this then, shall we? Green. You can really smell the alcohol. I mean, what is it, 57.2, and it gives you a real intense nose prickle. Green olives, green apple, astringent green fruit, green citrus. It's very green, and there's even a bit of green tea as well, and yeah, there's a little bit of a green tobacco, it's technically called a candela leaf. It's just a real green nose at the end of the day. I mean, it's even got sort of a greenish kind of tinge to it. Yeah, it's again all about the cask. I mean, it's interesting from a sort of a technical perspective, I suppose, of what sherry casks do to your whiskey. But it really doesn't have the sort of the light and shade. Let's see what that's like. Herbal Oloroso, green fruit again, green olives, green nuts. It's quite bitter. That alcohol is really enhancing the bitterness on that finish, and yeah, okay, it's got a nice kind of tongue-tingling spice as well, but ooh, that's pretty intense. We'll see what a little drop of water does to it, but I can still feel that that intensity of alcohol. Pretty much the same, to be honest with you. Again, it's still very green and very sherried. Let's see what the power's like. Okay, so little less sherry, a bit more cereal possibly, still really bitter. I mean, really bitter. And I don't mind a little bitterness in a bit of, in my whiskey. Sometimes it's actually quite pleasant, certainly when you've got quite a sweet sort of style of whiskey. That sort of bitterness just kind of, stops the sort of sweetness being sort of too OTT. But this doesn't have any sherry sweetness at all. It's just so bitter. And it is like literally green tea leaves. I'm not really loving that one at all, I'm afraid. Okay, so let's move on to the Silent Night. Will I be silent after this one? So this is a 13-year-old Benrinnes, Firstville PX Barrique finish. Again, let's see what the nose gives us on this one. And again, look at the colour of that. It's actually quite reserved. You have to kind of work at it to get the sort of silky, raisinated fruits, treacle. But again, I'm not getting any sort of Benrinnes character. I mean, Benrinnes is again another one of these kind of odd distilleries where, I mean, you could argue it's a quite traditional style of spirit. It does lend itself to sherry, and yeah, it does, absolutely. But I'm not getting any character of that. It's quite chunky, and it's foursquare, and it's kind of lightly PXy, and it's again. Let's see what the part's like. It's a damp moss kind of character. Again, slightly green fruit, oloroso, a little bit of bitterness. It's not really saying PX, although there is a sort of a slight silkiness to the raisinated fruit, but again it's really bittering. The tannins are bittering like hell. Bit of cereal. Maybe they should have called this Moss on the Moor or something like that. I don't know about a Silent Night. It's probably silent because they've got a load of moss in their face. I don't know. Sorry, being a bit disingenuous there, I think. Anyway, let's just put a little drop of water with it and see if that brings anything out or not. Not really. You can tell it's that traditional style of spirit. It's got that, again, very foursquare, very chunky kind of, in that kind of upright Glen Granty kind of sort of style. But again, no spirit. It's all sherry. Let's see what the price like. Again, there's that sort of damp earth character, the damp, wet moss. Softer, not quite so bitter, still fairly heavily sherried, it has to be said. And again, it's really not appealing to me at all, it has to be said. Okay, so moving on to the final whiskey of the afternoon. This is the Mask of Alpeton, Peated Highland, 15 years old. Let's see what the nose gives on this then, shall we? Oh, mother! That's astringent. That's peaty. That's sheep poo. That reminds me of Ardmore. I don't think it is, because I think it's probably more likely to be Ardmore. They have an absolute bucket full of casks of Ardmore, it has to be said, as I well know. But this really smells like Ardmore. It's that stinky, animally, sheep poo kind of peat. There's a real intriguing characteristic going on here. You're getting the sort of tequila, but it's in the background. It's kind of green banana, a little bit of pulped fruit, mushrooms, grass, apple. Now I like this. This is really interesting. I mean, I know that everybody doesn't, or there are a number of people that don't like peated malts, is what I'm trying to say. But this is really intriguing. This is interesting. This is kind of a little bit outside of the box. It's not your usual. and it works. I mean, it's just fantastic, it has to be said, and it's kind of like, hallelujah. You know, I like this. This is really interesting. Okay, I'm going to put my hand up and say, well, distillery character, well, actually, it smells like Rouen, you know, so, you know, if it is Peated Glen Turret, then plenty of distillery character. If it's Ardmore, then, well, it's got a stinky Ardmore, and I can't remember coming across too many stinky Ardmores, but it's fun, it's interesting, and it's, you know, they should have done a lot of other stuff like this, has to be said. But anyway, sort of pass on. Now that kind of starts off with the barley and the grass and a little bit of honey. The tequila cask is coming in a little quicker, so I'm getting more of that pulped agave kind of fruit, white fruit, a little bit of lime. The peat is drier. It's not so animally. It's not so smelly or stinky. It does feel more like Ardmore on the palate. It's got a little bit more of an earthy kind of peat character. It's got some lovely length to it, has to be said, and it's one of those kind of whiskies that, I don't know, maybe some people would find it disappointing because it doesn't the palate doesn't quite have the sort of like the sheep poo intensity of the nose, and they might feel a little bit sort of let down by that. But for me, I love that. I mean, it's kind of like saying one thing on the nose and the palate is just actually a little bit less weird, it has to be said. It's got a lovely length to it. I mean, it really does linger. It doesn't need any water. I mean, it's what, 50.4%. I'm not going to bother putting any water with it. It'll probably fall apart with water and I'll be going, oh my god. But so I'm going to leave it as it is because that was a really nice one to finish on. So yeah, good stuff. Okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Well, firstly, as always, a big thank you to the guys at Brave New Spirits for the samples for today's episode of the show. A mixed bunch, it has to be said. And if I'm going to be honest, there's too many of these were just far too oaked, and they were really not that intriguing, apart from the final bottling, which was kind of like, whoa, that's a bit weird and wonderful. The rest were all a bit kind of like, I don't understand why so many bloody sherry finishes. It was, you know, I can only assume whoever selected these casks, maybe it was somebody different to who selected the casks for the initial couple of releases in the Whisky Hero series, and maybe they just have a fetish for sherry. I don't know, but anyway, we'll look at the individual ones. Like I said, so the Linkwood, okay, I will say that the balance did kind of improve a little bit with water, but you know, why I can only assume, and that the initial cast, the original cast, didn't add enough kind of oak character, so that they obviously felt like it needed more bourbon character, it needed to be bigger. I personally believe it may well have been better off leaving it alone, but there you go. The Royal Brackla, well, I wouldn't have known it was Royal Brackla. Again, it was far too much sherry. But I mean, you know, like I said, from a sort of, if you're looking at it from a kind of what's the word, sort of not experimental, but if you're looking at it from a technical point of view, that was the word I was struggling to find. It was more Palo Cortado than it was kind of, or to me anyway, it's more Palo Cortado than it was actual Oloroso. The Mannochmore, quite herbal, quite burnt, wasn't a real big fan of that. Yeah, I mean, it was a PX, but it wasn't sort of like, again, it didn't sort of come across as overly PX, it just had that sort of Oloroso kind of feel to it. The Might of the Moor, the Auchroisk, green, just green, and it was just so hard going, it has to be said. And again, all right, sort of Auchroisk can have that very kind of green character, you know, green apples, that kind of thing, and so maybe there was some distillery character in amongst all the greenness, but you know, again was a bit on the heavy sherry side. The Benrinnes, again, I suppose probably showed a little bit more sort of PX kind of character, but I kind of, you know, it was again just a sherry monster, and it was just not really interesting. And if you're going to do a finish, fine, no problem with that, but just kind of keep it to a bit of a minimum, or you know, just, I don't know, just do something that's not sort of like overtly masking at the end of the day. I know there's always this sort of, we need to make our Benrinnes a little bit different from, you know, so-and-so's Benrinnes, but at the end of the day, you're making it different by giving it a sort of like a great label. So, you know, you don't need to sort of swamp the thing in sherry. And it really comes down to the sort of the final bottling, where suddenly you have some kind of interesting whiskey. It's kind of a little bit left field. Sure, it's not going to appeal to everybody because it's peated, but they kind of gone out on a limb a little bit and gone and done something a bit different, you know. And it really worked. I thought it was a really great fun bottling, whereas a lot of the others were just sort of like, yeah, overly oaked, and you know. Anyway, it is what it is at the end of the day. I mean, I can't fault the quality of the spirit in any of these releases. None of these bottlings were blemished. There was no sulphur, there was no nastiness. They were all crisp, clean, pristine. But at the end of the day, previous releases were just so much more interesting. And I hope that when they do sort of like, you know, I think this is batch 3 of Whisky Heroes, I really hope that when they go and do batch 4, they will just kind of like go, right, okay, let's just kind of dial down on the sherry. Let's look at what we've got that's been aged in American oak, that's got plenty of character, distillery character, interest, maybe the odd wine cask, maybe the odd sherry finish. There are people that love them. So yeah, just one or two maybe, not every bloody bottling at the end of the day. And I think, you know, just calm it down on the sherry front. So anyway, that's my take on this set of releases. Hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. Really interesting one coming up next week. I won't say any more. They're all interesting at the end of the day, aren't they? But, you know, some are more probably interesting than others. But anyway, again, big thank you to Brave New Spirits. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Maybe you're probably sitting there thinking, well, he's talking out of his butt. But my butt is there, and it's half empty now, considering all the alcohol. But anyway, until next week, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good ramming.